Since 2010, there's been a continual decline in quality for the Battlefield franchise. Vanilla Battlefield 3 took almost a year to fix, Battlefield 4 was a broken mess, and Hardline is just fucking awful. Does Battlefield 1 buck the trend, or is it more of the same from DICE and E.A.? Hardline is the worst Battlefield game this decade, and Battlefield 1 is a not-so-distant second. Its awkward design philosophy causes the flagship game mode operations to be flawed, despite receiving the most developer attention. Rush was once my favourite game mode, but it's now nothing more than an afterthought in recent games. Battlefield 1 is no exception. This wouldn't be a major issue were operations good enough, but it isn't. Maps aren't designed with Rush in mind, and that results in lackluster gameplay. Sound familiar? The exact same was said for Battlefield 4, but as I've not played it, I won't pass judgment. Just kidding, it was shit, and I don't need to own it to know that. Rush is basically dead in Battlefield 1. Compare the number of Rush-exclusive Bad Company 2 maps to the last 3 Battlefield games. DICE either doesn't care for Rush or have no idea what made it so good in the first place. It's plausible to assume both, but if DICE insist on keeping Rush around, they must focus on designing maps specifically for it. Bad Company 2 was designed around 24 to 32 player servers, something which suits Rush's higher paced gameplay. Compare this to Conquest, which is slower, more open, and relies on rotations rather than sieging. Operations takes the openness of Conquest and ham-fistedly incorporates Rush's fast-paced, siege and breach gameplay, something which usually never works harmoniously, regardless of what game. Battlefield 1, yet again, is no exception. Conquest doesn't suffer the same fate as Rush. However, playing as infantry is not always pleasant, due to bad map designs, the overbearing strength of vehicles, and your reliance upon them. This results in gameplay being nowhere near as satisfactory as it was in Battlefield 3, despite its issues. As for the other game modes, they fucking suck. That's all the analysis they deserve. Battlefield 1 doesn't give much in the way of primary weapons. Having to grind a class from level 4 to level 10 for one weapon, and specific in-game requirements to unlock others, is retarded, and only exists to extort money from those too lazy to grind for it. Much like weapon skins, it's standard in extorting money from already overpriced games. It should die in a fire, but it won't because it's EA and people keep buying their shit. I usually dislike using iron sights in the vast majority of first-person shooters, but Battlefield 1 doesn't make me want to kill myself in this regard, so it's serviceable. Gun modifications are standard in first-person shooters now. The ability to choose your recoil pattern preference, your rifle's scope and its magnification is a good addition for those who want more choice. More importantly, when teams are balanced and playing on somewhat balanced maps, Battlefield 1 can be very enjoyable. Unfortunately, in my experience at least, this does not seem to happen very often, due in part to horrendous maps, a bad matchmaking system, bad loadout balance, vehicles being absurdly strong against infantry, rewarding losing teams with game-changing utility, and so on. I take less of an issue with elite kits, but there's still an issue nonetheless. My biggest issue with Battlefield 1's multiplayer is map design. The vast majority of these maps range from decent to god-awful, with 1 or 2 goodish maps. The maps are either far too open, in cases like Verdun Heights' second sector, where objectives are positioned in hard-to-access areas, such as on top of a hill, with few to no flanking opportunities, and in a valley, accessible only by totally exposing yourself to crossfire. Other maps force you through severe choke points, such as Verdun Heights' third sector. I hate this map if you couldn't tell. It's a fucking piece of shit. I've had zero good experiences with it. How DICE thought this would result in diverse and interesting gameplay is beyond me. Infantry only, fighting uphill through a valley. It's a recipe for disaster. What was the design philosophy behind this particular map? Not to mention the other bad maps in this game. Argonne Forest, Suez, Sinai Desert, Soissons, Ballroom Blitz, Galatia, Empire's Edge, to name but a few. The Kaiserschlacht operation is okay, but 64 players on Amiens is a mistake. The vast openness of a significant number of these maps can cause games to be heavily one-sided. A knock-on effect of this is usually that the losing team resorts to sniping in large numbers. I recently played a game where 13 of 29 players on the enemy team were sniping. This causes games to either slow down as there aren't enough people left to attack objectives, or there aren't enough people left to defend objectives and thus the defending team collapses without effective defense. Argonne Forest, Fort de Vaux, Verdun Heights, etc. have areas which contain unavoidable choke points with few opportunities to flank. This can cause relatively balanced games to grind to a complete halt, where barring a miracle, the attacking team are unable to make progress through the choke points. Few flanking opportunities result in huge advantages to the team defending the choke. I can't honestly say that there are any really good maps in Battlefield 1. There are a few decent ones that become overrated due to how shit the selection of maps are, but overall, map design is an issue so severe and detrimental to gameplay that irrespective of the outcome, games are extremely frustrating to play. While Battlefield 1 is an okay game, good map design would drastically improve gameplay without having to balance anything. This isn't even taking into account how disgustingly broken and game-changing the behemoth vehicles are. They provide an opportunity to gain significant ground where a team may otherwise not have. This feels like a cheap solution to addressing how skewed map balance is, even if that was not the intention. Infantry struggles to take them down, and one reason for this is DICE's continual struggle to balance the classes. The other reason is that vehicles, both air and land, are simply too strong in Battlefield 1. But I think there may be a way to attain better balance. Currently, there is a clear disparity between classes when taking all nuance into account. The Recon class is the strongest overall, simply due to how most maps are designed. Factor in how much easier it is to snipe on Battlefield 1 only makes the class stronger. The Assault class dominates maps that focus on close quarters engagements, but falls off mid-range. While it has most of the tools to destroy vehicles, due to map designs, getting close to one can prove difficult. Since vehicles can repair themselves, you need multiple Assault users to reliably take down a single vehicle. Medic is and will always be Medic. Healing and reviving will never stop being an important aspect of the game. While the guns aren't as reliable close range, or as powerful long range, they fill the gap between Recon and Assault and add another flavour to the weapon sandbox. That being said, the guns in the Medic class can be underwhelming due to hit registration and netcode issues. These three classes, despite Recon's obvious strength, cover all the ranges. Support is effective against infantry due to LMGs being laser pointers, but that's the only area in which you would want to use it. This class suffers the most from a lack of identity. You want a real support, and you don't have enough equipment to do anything important. This is how I think DICE should repurpose the four classes. Assault should keep its strength in close quarters, but focus on pushing objectives and have the ability to kill light tanks and light tanks only. For the class utility, I'd give it the rifle grenade with a choice between the HE, smoke and frag, and the limpet charge. Engineer should return to its former strength, repairing ally vehicles and destroying heavier enemy vehicles. The class's utility would be as follows: AT mine, AT grenade and the AT rocket, but it's usable without the bipod. Also the repair tool. Support, being an actual support, means giving it the med crate, syringe, bandage pouch, ammo crate and ammo pack. But in order to compensate for its other weaknesses, I would increase non-deployed LMG recoil and reduce LMG's rate of fire, but give them a minor damage increase, particularly against vehicles. As for Recon, I'd like to see it forced to interact with the map more. I'd do this by giving it the C4 and mortar. I'd revert the mortar back to its Bad Company 2 design, with a 50-meter maximum call-out range and a 5-minute cooldown, with the option to choose between HE or smokes. The Recon class would keep the flare gun, trench periscope and K-bullets, but I'd remove tripwire, sniper decoy and sniper shield from the game entirely. Since vehicles can self-repair, vehicle camping is exacerbated, making the repair tool virtually redundant. Not to mention there is no effective way for infantry to deal with planes, and getting close to land vehicles can prove difficult. Compare this to the options vehicles have against infantry. Providing self-repair is removed, I have no issue with vehicles being as strong as they are. The ability to spawn in a vehicle promotes vehicle camping. The alternative is having many people wait in base for the vehicle to spawn. It's an issue that has plagued Battlefield for many years, and we may never find a solution, so pick your poison. As for behemoths, they are effectively a catch-up mechanic put in place to counter bad maps. This should either be altered or removed due to their game-changing nature. Behemoth should only be usable for one sector, and once the sector is taken, it self-destructs, ejecting or teleporting any players inside to their new base. I doubt achieving perfect balance is possible. Repurposing the classes so they are better against one another, and at the same time reducing the strength of vehicles, at least gives infantry a chance to thrive. The majority of this video has not been positive, and with good reason. There are far too many issues preventing Battlefield 1 from being a good game. Excluding the issues I brought up already, Battlefield 1 is just buggy. Poor map geometry causes random unit collisions. Vaulting isn't as smooth because of these unit collisions. Bad netcode causes poor hit reg, and the list just goes on. These are all so frustrating to deal with, and they happen in most games. These bugs are fairly consistent, and for a AAA title this isn't acceptable. It's looking quite ominous for the franchise, as the next Battlefield game will have around 3 years of interrupted development time, and that just isn't enough in the modern era. With that said, the game isn't terrible. It's slightly better than the average FPS, which isn't much of an achievement these days. So I'd give it a 6 out of 10, although I feel like I'm being kinda generous with that. It's a weak entry in the Battlefield franchise, and excluding Hardline, I think it's safe to say it's the worst Battlefield game this decade. We can only hope that things turn themselves around in the future. I say hope, because I wouldn't count on it happening anytime soon. As for the lackluster campaign, it's too short, too linear for the most part, too reliant on cutscenes for exposition, largely forgettable and unlikable characters, and the list goes on. The first story is the most varied gameplay-wise, and has a couple of interesting missions. The second story mostly sucks, the lead character is unlikable, and his motives change too soon with no major character development. The missions are okay, but nothing memorable. What the fuck even happens in the third and fourth stories? You can run through a fair chunk of them without fighting, and this was on the hardest difficulty. The fifth story has enjoyable stealth gameplay, but it's way too short. The boss fight is a good idea, but fuck armored trains. Overall, the single player feels like an afterthought to the multiplayer. The campaign isn't compelling. It feels like a half-hearted effort just to please the masses. Though, I suppose that's kind of fitting for the franchise as a whole. And with that, we've reached the end of this half-assed review for Battlefield 1, I think. Although I kind of made an effort, so it wasn't really half-assed. I'll be making more videos in the not-too-distant future, in before I don't. And there'll be a mix of gaming and non-gaming content to look out for. To the few, if any of you who watched right until the very end, or just watched the video at all, to be honest, fucking hell. Thank you very much for watching. Matane, Jane, bye bye. Argonne Forest, Fort de Vaux, Verdun Heights, etc. have areas which contain unavoidable choke points with I keep saying flu, am I fucking retarded?